Or maybe there's just, I don't know. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another session of Bob the Father. So tonight, actually, it's a kind of a special night. We're starting the school year. Our faculty reported back yesterday. Tonight, we're having parent-teacher nights. So that's tomorrow night and tonight. We have our popsicle social on Thursday for our students. So it's like we have a pretty good turnout for tonight as far as the parents are concerned. So that's good news. Um, Fortunately, I don't have to be there because I don't have to be there. So we have other people to cover that. So yeah, the floor is open for any questions anyone might have, if for anything really. So
I think it's fun. Okay. Um, Remember when we were practicing mass? We were doing the mock mass.
yeah. So
For everyone, yeah.
for those who don't know, in our OCI this summer, we're coming to the end of the session, and one of the sessions on the mass, we had the catechumens and candidates walk through kind of the mass as the role of like priest, deacon, server. So kind of a faux mass. We did it back in the sacristy, not in the sanctuary. So yeah, so that's what John is talking about there. So yeah,
Yes. Okay. So I think it's in the.
I also do that with the grade school kids too, which is kind of fun. It's actually a great joy for me because I get to kind of watch and chuckle a little bit. It's humorous for sure.
So in the. Is it the college or the antiphon? Oh, so here we go.
Hmm.
Loving and merciful Father, grant favors to all. So in the end, the Son who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit. And I remember from a while back, it was always pronounced one God forever and ever. And so we don't say that anymore, I noticed.
Yes.
And when she said that, I was like, oh, Nino, but you were like, no, you don't say that anymore.
Well,
So-
the reason I said that is because that's very fresh. So the reason that we don't say that, and this is something got, I guess, missed in the new translation. So all the, of course, all the prayers from the college for the what they call the high priestly prayers, the prayers over the gifts, the prayer for communion, even like the prefaces are all translated from Latin,
Yes.
right? So in the Latin version of the prayer, especially the college, so the college usually ends with what we call a doxology, right? In the unity of the Holy Spirit through God the Father, through the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever. So the translation there is not Deum unum, which would be translated one God. It's just Deum in secula seculorum, right? So for whatever reason, that was never, when it got translated in English and retranslated in 2011, that was never brought over in the new translation in 2011. So they all got translated one God, but the actual faithfulness of the Latin would say, well, there is no Deum unum, it's Deum, right? So Deum, God, right? In secula seculorum, not Deum unum in secula seculorum. So there was a direction that came out. This might have been, I mean, it was shortly after I got ordained, so it probably was maybe 2020, 2021, maybe, that directed priests to ignore the one. They could either change it physically in the missal or just ignore it completely, but one God was not to be said. Now, you'll still hear priests say it because it's been that way for 50 years, right? So you might hear a priest every now and again it slip out. I know I've been guilty of it too. Every once in a while, I was like, one God, oh shoot, now you don't make a big deal of it, but the faithful translation is God forever and ever. So you don't say one God.
Okay. So if a priest were to miss, you're not like saying things that are now against the faith, or it's not like it's just.
I mean, it's recognizing the unity of the Trinity. One God.
Well, yeah.
But you're also saying it in a context of naming the three persons. So it's like, A, is that confusing? But B, it wouldn't be theologically wrong to say one. But if you're going by the rubric itself and what the translation is,
it's just
one is not
God.
part of it, right?
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, there's another question I have. which I think I know the answer to this, but I don't use the Missal. I use, the Magnificat.
Sure, which is always fun sometimes.
Well, yeah, because it doesn't follow every day, especially the saints and stuff like that. Got to be on your toes. When we're in mass and there's numbers on the side, are those numbers were to look? If you were what are those numbers?
Okay, good. Those
Lottery
numbers. No. Yeah.
Suggestions?
So we have these boards on each side of the sanctuary that numbers are put on them, and usually we'll use them on Sundays. And what they're used for, or for maybe all school masses, what we put on there is the hymn number. So usually the way it's done here at St. Anne by our music director, he puts the top number is the page number in the music issue where the readings are kept and the prayers for Sunday. And then the other numbers are numbers of the songs in the music issue to sing. So you'll notice the second number is always our entrance song. Sometimes there might be the offertory song. Sometimes that's sung separately by the choir or the cantor. Either way is okay, right? Some songs, I think that's part of the liturgy when we talk about the music. Not every song is meant to be sung by everybody.
Well, that's
right,
true.
Yeah. So sometimes the offertory especially will be sung just by the cantor or maybe by the choir. And then, of course, you'll have the Eucharistic hymn, the communion song, and then the dismissal, right? So those are the four main times when we sing, especially like a hymn or a long elongated song, would be the procession in, the offertory, communion, maybe a couple for communion, maybe like a post-communion. And even that is only maybe sung by the choir or by the cantor, and then the dismissal. So depending on how long communion goes, or maybe there's one song, maybe there's two songs, maybe there's only, the one that covers all of it. It just kind of depends on that regard. But those are what those boards are showing is the music numbers in the hymnal. But the top number is always also the page number where the readings are for that particular day, right? So you brought up the Magnificat. The reason that's sometimes frustrating is because a lot of these things, where they even like the missalettes that we use, right, and even the music, the music issues that we use, these are all done by particular publishers who maybe don't necessarily have the learning and the actual structure of like what the liturgy entails. So, like for instance, that came up this past Thursday. So, for anyone who may recall, what was this past Thursday? August 6th. Just so anyone's wondering. It's a feast of the Lord. Transfiguration. So the Transfiguration is one of those very interesting days because if it falls on a Sunday, we celebrate Transfiguration. So if it's like the 21st Sunday of Ordinary Time, if August 6th falls on that Sunday, we're not celebrating the 21st Sunday of Ordinary Time. We're celebrating the Transfiguration. There's a few other days like that in the calendar that kind of take that precedence. For instance, another one coming up on September 14th. That's the Exaltation of the Cross. If that falls on a Sunday, we're celebrating that day, right? Not whatever Sunday it falls on. There are certain days, like especially maybe later in the year, Holy Days of Obligation. So, for instance, the Immaculate Conception is one of those days where no matter where it falls. Well, it's not every one though, right? So, like All Saints Day, for instance, this year falls on a Sunday. Do we celebrate All Saints Day? No. No. One coming up pretty soon, like actually this Saturday, the Assumption of Mary falls on the 15th. That falls on a Saturday. So you'd say, well, wait a minute. Don't we have a Vigil Mass on Saturday night? Which do we celebrate? We celebrate Sunday. That takes precedence in those regards, right? But there are certain days, like for instance, okay, the Presentation of the Lord. That takes precedence, right? It does. So if that falls on a Sunday, we celebrate that day on February 2nd. And we call these feasts of the Lord, they're aspects of the Lord's life that we tend to emphasize because it's direct toward Jesus, which is totally fine. Some days are a little less evident, like for instance, the dedication of St. John Lateran. That's November 9th. Now, when that falls on a Sunday, we celebrate that day, but it's like, wait a minute. What does it have to do with Jesus' life? That's a great question, right? Because that church was dedicated 300, 400 years after the resurrection, but it's also the Cathedral of Rome. So it's like, well, all right, that's a special thing. We should probably emphasize that. We should probably elevate that. Okay, fine. The Solemnity of St. Peter and Paul. Oh, okay, that's June 29th. Well, wait a minute. I mean, Peter and Paul, yeah, sure, they're very special people in the life of the church, but the Feast of the Lord, like, take precedent over like a celebration of Easter Sunday. That seems like an odd thing. Well, Peter and Paul were very instrumental in the growth of the church that Christ founded. So that makes a lot of sense that we would celebrate them too. It gets kind of complicated. So the way that looks then, because this Thursday in the Magnificat and maybe the Missal, it had two readings. It celebrates if it were solemnity, but the problem is it's not. It doesn't fall on Sunday. So we celebrate as a feast, but it's very misleading because you're like, where's the second reading? Where's the creed? It's not a solemnity. So it's.
I noticed you had Nick go down and talk to the reader ahead of time. Explain what was going on.
You put a note in the missal in the lectionary saying, "Do not read this," because it's like so. September 14th is another one of those days. It's like, well, okay, that one's a little bit trickier because it does fall on I think it's a Monday. Never mind. I think we're fine. But if it falls on a Saturday, that gets a little tricky because, does that take precedence over the Vigil Mass for Sunday? There's a Vigil, so it gets very complicated. That's why we get paid the big bucks to make these determinations.
Well, I'm here to tell you, if I had the time and I started going through diocese website for masses on Saturday, I'm going to find a mass for the Holy Day somewhere in the morning.
Oh no, of course. So the mass. So if the mass on the Saturday morning, this upcoming Saturday morning, should be celebrated the Assumption of Mary if the parish has one. Yes, you can't do anything other than that for the day. But once 4:00 hits, we're no longer in Saturday. We're now in Sunday, and so now we celebrate the Sunday Mass, right?
That's one good change they made with that.
Mm-hmm.
Although a lot of people were against it, especially so-called
True.
people.
Oh, we have a question here. I have a question. I know we all have the potential to be saints, but are saints also predetermined? I guess you could say in some ways yes, in some ways no. So when it comes to what we call like predestinationism, we would say God knows everything that's going to happen, and He has every outcome in His mind. He cannot help but have that. That's just the nature of God. We, though, because we are given free will, have a choice in working with that will or not, right? So a good aspect that would be Judas. Judas is a very interesting figure, right? The church doesn't necessarily venerate him as a saint, although the Eastern Church does, which is interesting. But we also wouldn't say that he's definitely in hell. And if we're defined as saint by that anyone with God in heaven, well, even there's more than just the canonized saints are actually in heaven. So in that regard, you could say, well, okay, God knew what Judas would do. He knew that Judas even would betray him. But also that was part of his plan. And then by fulfilling that plan, did Judas actually bring about the fulfillment of that plan? Well, yeah, but that happened in a very evil way, let's say, right? I mean, maybe not an intended way. It was also possible that Judas wasn't doing it intentionally. His thought process could have been, look, I'm going to push Jesus in this position so he can manifest himself as being the Messiah and overcome. So his intention may have been very, very good, but also the way he executed may not have been so good. So did he actually deserve to be put in hell for that? That's between him and God. That's the thing. I don't know, right? These are kind of things that are beyond our human understanding. And we would say definitely God had a plan for Judas. He's a plan for each and every one of us. But we also have a say in working with that plan to merit our own salvation. So Jesus going to the cross redeemed all of us, gave us the opportunity to get into heaven.
And Judas too.
And we, though, through our free will and actions, merit that. So in other words, it's not set in stone that once we're born, once we're baptized, we're going there. Which is why if you have to ask a Catholic, well, are you saved? Their response might be, well, I hope. I mean, that's all we really can say, because who knows? If I go out and start committing crimes and mortal sins like the next day and I die, even though
Only God knows.
God can forgive me if I'm open to that, I still have to be open to it. And so I can't predict the future, as no one else can do that too. So we do have a say, though, where we end up. And that's one of the beauties of the saints, is that they're also models for us, that they were also sinners, right? Every saint except for one was a sinner. Mary being the only
Right.
exception in that regard. So I think it should give us hope. We look at people like St. Paul and St. Anthony, St. Augustine, all these other saints that maybe didn't live lives well at first, but converted and turned to God. That should give us all hope that we can do the same, right? With God being all knowing, wouldn't he know who would eventually become saints? Yeah, I mean, sure. I think that just illustrates the point. So is it possible the serial killer could have been intended to be a saint, went down the wrong path due to the free will? Yeah. I mean, let's put it this way. God's will is that we all end up with him, right? That's God's will. God's will is we all end up with him in heaven. He wants that for all of us. Whether we do or not is up to us. That's maybe the best we can say about it. But yeah, great question. Thank you for that.
Anything else? Could you remember your question? That's it.
I'm thinking something about the feast days. How are they celebrated differently? I'm not sure where I'm going.
You mean like between the Novus Ordo and the Extraordinary Form, or are you talking about like in the different churches, like in the East and the West?
I think differently from the everyday.
Okay, so if we're talking about the Novus Ordo, we have kind of 3 levels of solemnity, right? So any other day, let's say like next Monday, for instance, I'm not sure about that. I got to check on that. Because August is kind of weird, because it seems like every day we have an option every day for a saint. We have a saint every day, but depending on where you are, different regions, the Ordo may will indicate certain saints are celebrated. So let's say there's no saint scheduled in the Ordo for that day. That's a ferial day. It's like a regular day. It's a day that is within the ordinary time. That's just normal. Above that, let's say you have a saint that has some significance in the area that the local bishop really appreciates. That could be elevated to what we call an optional memorial, meaning the celebrant has the choice if you celebrate it or not, right? Tomorrow is an example of that. We have Jane Frances de Chantal. She's an optional memorial. We could celebrate her. Otherwise, we celebrate a ferial day. It's up to the celebrant. Personally, I always celebrate the saint because I think it's good to do that. There are certain days, though, that are obligatory memorials. So those are like who have a universal impact on the church. There's kind of global acceptance as that saint as being very, very significant and important. And so we would no matter where you are, you don't have the option. You have to celebrate that saint day. Then you have above that feast days. So we were talking about earlier about feasts of the Lord. Those are always going to be feast days. Whenever they fall on the calendar, it's going to be at least a feast, right? So you have the Gloria. You celebrate that with a little more solemnity, maybe more candles, more nicer vestments, whatever. Above that, you have solemnities. So your main levels are memorials, feast days, solemnities. Those are kind of the main levels of solemnity that you would celebrate.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
first?
sure. Yeah.
So you go from just a burial day to your first that is called a
Optional memorial.
okay. And so the only difference is in like the entrance antiphon or the collect. So that's where you would just change that a little bit. Everything else would be
Well, so usually for any memorial, the collect is always proper, right? Meaning it's for that particular saint,
right.
right? So if you look in the missal, right, that we have where you celebrate the masses,
It's got
for every saint there is actually a designated collect for that saint.
Yeah.
Now one would ask, though, okay, then what about the rest of the prayers? Because we mentioned earlier about these high priestly prayers, like the prayers over the gifts and the prayers after communion, and even the preface.
Mhm.
Well, those all come then from the commons. So the missal, as well as the breviary, is kind of set between what they call propers, meaning, hey, this is just dedicated for this particular saint, this particular day, and the commons, which are more generalized. So, like, for instance, there's a common of pastors, there's a common of martyrs, there's a common of religious, holy men and women. I think I'm missing a couple. Doctors of the church, right? So these are all commons that if there's not a proper, you go to the common, right? So for tomorrow, for instance, for Jane Frances de Chantal, she has a proper collect, but the other prayers will get from the common of holy women, right?
Mhm.
Fine.
Sounds proper.
Yeah.
Proper to do that.
Yeah. That's what the liturgy envisions for these things, right? Now on feast days, though, everything is proper. Meaning, like last Thursday, the collect, the prayers over the gifts, the prayer for communion, the preface are all directed towards the transfiguration, especially for that day,
That's what. Okay.
right? Same thing with solemnities. Solemnities, their prayers are all directed towards that day.
So along with the candles and the nicer dress
Mhm.
on a feast
Mhm.
day, you would also change. So
Well, you don't change.
Not
What
change.
I'm saying is
you would use
you use the
specific-
propers for that day,
Yeah.
right? And in this mass especially, you would add the Gloria.
Okay.
Now, in the Liturgy of the Hours, you would also sing or say the Te Deum in the office of readings, but that's a whole. We won't get into that. That still gets a little too in the weeds. So we go up to this from a feast day to a solemnity, and again, this is all kind of an understanding of what we call progressive solemnity. So as we elevate, there's parts of the liturgy that are added, that are emphasized, that are brought in that you wouldn't have on a normal ferial day. So for a solemnity, you actually celebrate that as if it were just a regular Sunday, except the readings and all the prayers are directed towards the particular day. So you would have a second reading from the New Testament for a solemnity. You would add the creed, whether the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed. It would be like if you went to Sunday Mass, you would be going to a solemnity, right? Except, again, the readings are different and the prayers would be directed towards the day. So for coming up this weekend on the Assumption of Mary, all the prayers are proper for the Assumption of Mary. The readings are proper for the Assumption of Mary, meaning you can't deviate from the readings. They have to be for the Assumption of Mary. You can't pull in your own readings. You can't use the one for the regular day of the Saturday of ordinary time. You've got to use those, right? Same thing with Sundays. Now, within the solemnity, then, there's also a Holy Day of Obligation. These are designated by the local bishop as days that actually require you to go to Mass that day under the penalty of mortal sin, right? Again, there are exemptions, just like a Sunday Mass. If I'm sick, if maybe I'm traveling, don't know where the masses are, if I'm taking care of an elderly family member, providing acts of charity, okay, right? You're exempt in that regard. But otherwise, barring those things, you should go to Mass, right? And again, we're talking about the Holy Days of Obligation within the St. Louis Archdiocese and many dioceses in the United States, there's only 5. So in addition to every Sunday, you have the Assumption of Mary, you have All Saints Day, you have Immaculate Conception, you have Christmas, and Mary, the Mother of God. So these really happen more in the end of the year for the most part, more towards the tail end. But the only day that actually, no matter what day it falls on, has that obligation is Immaculate Conception and Christmas. So those are the 2 days where if it falls on any day, you go. For the other ones, if they fall on a Saturday or a Monday, they don't carry that elevation. And that was, again, designated by the bishops back in 2000. And the reasoning is to unburden the faithful. So the thought is that, masses that, going to mass 2 days in a row would seem an undue burden. You can understand that in that maybe they had intent. I think the fruit of that has been, we've seen a reduction in the desire and or even the obligation to go on Sunday. The truth of the matter is, since that's been implemented, we haven't seen people go to mass as much. And so it almost had an adverse effect on people. So not only people are not going to Holy Obligation, they're not going on Sundays either. And if we're talking about the obligation of the third commandment, that seems like a problem for a lot of people. Wow. Okay. So I have another question. What are monks and friars and how did they begin? So let me ask, first I'd ask your question, Joe, about the solemnities and that kind of thing. Okay. Good. Monks and friars, well, boy, when did they begin? One could argue they began actually really early on in the church, where the church was said in the Acts of the Apostles, they had lived all things in common, and they lived together, dedicated towards prayer and breaking the bread, which means Mass, right? So we see kind of the early aspects of the church where this sort of like communal kind of set apart from the world aspect, which was happening like almost 10, 20 years after the resurrection of Jesus. So we see that modeled now in our current day with sisters and brothers who also live in common, that we have a particular charism that we would designate as monks and nuns. Now, you use the term monks and friars. Friars is a more generalized term. Friar just means brother. So brothers can actually be anyone in community, but brothers particularly have a charism working in the community. So maybe brothers teach, or maybe brothers work in hospitals or do parish administration or whatever, feed the poor, right? Those are actually like physical, practical things that brothers would do. Monks are actually designated for prayer. And oftentimes monks are what they call cloistered, meaning they're cut off from the world. They maybe see their family once a year, maybe, if that. Some go as extreme as actually taking like a vow of silence. But the hallmark is they all take vows, what they call the evangelical counsels, meaning vows of chastity, obedience, and poverty. Like, for instance, compare that to, like, let's say, an archdiocesan priest. I don't take vows of poverty. I take a vow of celibacy, and I take a vow of obedience to my bishop. But I don't take a vow of poverty, right? And in that regard, I'm not a monk. I live in the community. I actually, engage with the people, that kind of thing, right?
You talk to folks.
I talk to people. Yeah, right. I engage. Right. I have a practical ministry outside of prayer. I do pray. You're wrong, but prayer is the fuel that fuels my mission and fuels my ministry, not the only thing I do. And so we see kind of the first inklings of that more practically around the 3rd century. So there's this what they saw the grandfather of what they call modern monasticism was a man by the name of Anthony, not Anthony of Padua, Anthony of the desert, or Anthony of Egypt. So he lived, like I said, in the 3rd century, the 200s. So not far after, the death of the apostles, maybe 2 or 3 generations past that. But he lived a life as like a hermit. He would go out into the desert and just live there. And people would come to him for like spiritual guidance, spiritual advice. But what he did was designate a rule of kind of poverty. He would rely on the generosity of others, of deep prayer, deep chastity, obviously, right? And even obedience to his local bishops. He was a priest. So his mission was kind of started out, he brought others with him, they had brothers. And you would see like pockets of these communities pop up, especially in like kind of desolate wilderness type places. Well, you flash forward then a few hundred years to what they call this, the architect of modern monasticism, who was Saint Benedict. So Saint Benedict started the Benedictine order. It's the oldest order in the world, and he did that by setting a rule, so a way of life that again was directed towards obedience, poverty, chastity. But the way they lived in community, he would actually have rules. He would have regulations, laws that were blessed by the church, and that's how he lived it. Actually, his sister Scholastica also founded the female version of the Benedictines and lived the same way. They were brother and sister.
Good parents.
Actually, they died very early in their life. What's funny was they were wealthy. They were rich aristocrats people in modern day Rome, and we're talking about the 4th century, 4th, 5th century. So it was at a time where the Roman Empire was still around. They were very, very wealthy, influential people. Their parents died very young. Like Benedict was the older; he was only like 16 when his parents died. Scholastica was a few years younger, maybe like 12. So, but through his faith and going to mass, he gave up everything. He put his sister with a group of nuns, or what they called virgins back then. So, and that's actually kind of an interesting history too. But then he started this order with a group of men that started developing monasteries and started moving out in different areas and kind of grew and grew and grew. And the place where they started these monasteries just happened to start becoming centers of commerce, centers of like growth, and where the European modern cities were started developing. They all started with the Benedictines. Female religious orders actually have more of a kind of an interesting background. So there's been a lot of discussion in the church world, not to go inside Catholic baseball, but about women deaconesses. Now, there have been in history evidence, and even in scripture, of women who served. That's what deacon means, serve, right? Diakonos in Greek just means servant. And diakonia or diakonos, it's a female servant or a male servant. Now, in the scripture, they're used kind of interchangeably, but there is a distinction, especially when you get down to Greek, right? Whether they're actually like ordained or not. We do know 7 men were ordained deacons from the book of Acts, but there are this evidence of these women who were serving in capacity. Now, what was their function? Was their function to do what deacons do, like baptize and preach and witness marriages and funerals? No. The purpose of this diaconesses were not ordained; they were instituted, meaning a bishop would designate them, and their primary ministry was during baptism. They would be the person to either pour the water or dunk the person into the water, because back then it was very common practice in some not everywhere, but some regions, to get baptized in the nude. So as that tradition, that custom kind of became out of practice, there was no longer a need to have these women do those functions. And they became kind of the first abbesses or prioresses or leaders of these religious orders. So we want to make a distinction between the institution of a diaconess and the ordination of a deacon, because they are different. A deaconess never had the function of actually, preaching or burying or even actually doing the words of baptism. right? That was always done by an ordained person, whether another deacon or a priest or a bishop. And their function was much different because, well, at the time there was different custom. Now, one would argue, what if we go back to doing baptism in the nude? Fine, yes. Let's institute more deaconesses. Sure, I think anyone would be all for that, and that would probably be a good idea. But that's where we see kind of the roots of these religious orders that we have today, that now are still around. We still have Benedictines, we have Franciscans, we have Carmelites, we have Dominicans, right? So that's kind of where the founding of these came from. Yeah. Good. Anything else?
What was the question?
Do you want me to go through all of them that we just covered? Or?
Welcome
All
in.
right. I mean, that particular question was asked about what are monks and friars and
friars.
how they begin.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, if you come on time, you can actually maybe answer. Do you have any questions or anything? No?
No.
Sure. Are you sure?
Well, I have some ideas, right? But okay.
Okay. Do you want to share any of those ideas?
I don't know. Last time I was told it was heresy, so I probably not. But I'll work on it. So, like I said, I'll be back next week. I was just picking up some information.
Okay, great.
It's pretty sick.
Good. All right.
I got to stay awake.
Yeah, that's my guy.
All right. Well, I guess that's it for us here tonight. We'll see everyone next week for Bow to the Father. Again, Tuesday, 6:30 here in the dining room. So have a good week, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Hey, thanks for joining. Appreciate that.